Hey guys, today I'm going to be showing you the process of remaking my Somewhere Back in Time Bruce Dickinson costume. So, without further ado, let's get started. This is the original costume I had made back in the end of 2015 for the book Souls World Tour. It was alright for the time. I got the vest off Amazon, and the pants were just some cheap fabric that I sewed on from Walmart. Wet look spandex, and I just felt like I could do better, and I've been making more costumes recently, so I thought I'd give it a go at remaking this to be a bit more authentic. So we're gonna get started with the pants. I used the original jeans that I had for the first costume because they fit me pretty well, and I just ended up cutting up all the scales that were already on them that weren't already falling off, because these are 5 years old now, so they were kind of falling apart, but whatever, my sewing skills weren't that great back then. So I cut off all the scales and I put some aside to incorporate into the final product with the other leathers that I got, faux leathers. I wanted to try to dye the fabric a bit darker than it was, because part of the problem with the original was that if I was walking around any gaps between the scales, you could see the light gray fabric, and I didn't really like that, so I tried to dye these pants different colors since I liked them and wanted to use them for the new costume, but the dye didn't really work that well. They are a little darker, but you live and you learn. His pants from the tour had more than just black, which is what I used the last time. I just used black, but they've got some nice tans and greens and burgundies in there, so I went in search of some different colored faux leathers to use. I got a black color from my local craft store. I get that for bags and stuff that I make to begin with. And then I went to Etsy for some other colors. I found some tans. I got some fat quarters. Got a fat quarter of tan and a fat quarter of burgundy. And I thought I was getting a fat quarter of green, but when it came in the mail, this is what I got. About a foot of green fabric. So I ended up having to go order some more, but no big deal. So I took one of the original scales off the pants and I made a little pattern out of it so I could draw on the new fabrics. I did about 200 of these scales to begin with, and then when I went to sew them onto the pants I realized that I didn't cut out enough black, so I had to go out and go back and cut about 250 more of those out. So I had pretty sore hands after this was all said and done, because that's pretty thick fabric, and I was for some reason not using my good fabric scissors as I'm seeing here, so not sure why that was, but yeah. Ended up looking like these little guys. So I really wanted to machine sew these, because last time I hand sewed them I was having a really hard time. That was partially due to them being a floppy spandex fabric and they were a bit harder to work with, but really wanted to machine sew these, but no matter which way I turned and pulled the pants, they would not fit on a sewing machine, and so I ended up having to just hand sew them all. It was a bit of an annoying process. There would be many times where I would accidentally sew through the other side of the pants too, and I would stick my arm up the leg hole trying to make sure I didn't do it, and I would realize there was about 5 different spots where I sewed through the other side. I would have to go back and take a bunch of stitches out and re-sew a bunch of the scales back on, but we got it done. And a lot of the time it was a bit hard to stick the needle through the fabric. You know, you'd poke your fingers. I don't use thimbles or anything like that, so I ended up with some sore joints and sore fingertips from all this, but it ended up worth it in the end, I think. I think they turned out looking pretty good. So here is the finished product after hours of sitting on the couch and watching TV and poking my fingers. I think they turned out pretty good. I'm happy with them. Alright, now we're on to the vest. So I started this by taking my measurements and I made some patterns. I've never made patterns before, but I wanted this to be as authentic as it could to the real thing. And last time, like I mentioned, I just bought a vest off of Amazon that was camo. Didn't really look like his vest otherwise, it was just a camo vest that fit a girl. And so I wanted this to look more like the real thing, so took to the internet, learned how to make some patterns, grabbed a big brown roll of paper from Staples, and went to town on that. Alright, so here I'm working with my fabric for the vest. I was looking for a camo print denim, but I couldn't seem to find any camo print denim online, so I settled for a camo print canvas fabric. I'd never worked with canvas before, so I wasn't sure what I was getting in the mail, and it ended up being kind of just what I needed. It wasn't too far off of denim, so I was happy with that. And here I'm just tracing on the patterns. So now I'm just cutting out the pieces that I traced on with a big old seam allowance, because I was very nervous that I wouldn't have enough fabric to work with, but I ended up with too much in the end, so better safe than sorry. So after that was all cut out of the main piece of fabric, I pinned them all together and stuck them on my dress form to make sure they made vaguely the correct shape, and they did. I moved on to the sewing after that. Each side was composed of 4 pieces. We had these 2 side pieces that had the little point on them, and that point goes down in the armpit area, and then there was 2 rectangular shapes that go, or the 2 middle pieces. And on the front side of the vest, I added what's called a dart, and that just helps fit the female form a bit better. Being a female, I wanted it to fit my form a bit better, so we added that in there, even if it's not true to the original. And then I sewed that all together. So I had to go back, as I mentioned earlier. I left a pretty big seam allowance, and I left a bit too much actually. I ended up having to pop some seams and readjust the size because it ended up being a little bit too big for me, so I went back and I took it down another size. Alright, so I added some Velcro strips onto each side of the front of the vest and proceeded to sew them on. I also got this stuff called grommet tape off of Etsy, and I sewed that onto the sides. That's what we'll be putting the laces through. And something that I didn't show in the video is the piece that connects the sides of the front and the back. It's a piece of 2-way spandex. Usually spandex is 4-way, so there wasn't really a lot I could use. I've been sitting on this fabric for a while. I think I got it in a discount bin or something, but it ended up working perfect for those because I only really needed it to stretch one way. So I cut out a small piece of that and sewed it between the two. And here I'm just lacing up the sides. I got some faux suede cord, which worked pretty perfectly. Next came doing the pockets for the vest. I sewed them together before putting them on, and I added some buttons that I got off of Etsy. They were just hammer-ons. They were some antique brass. They worked pretty well for the look of the vest, so picked some of those up and just hammered them on. And after putting the buttons on, I sewed them on. After sewing the flaps onto the upper part of the pocket, I just took my X-Acto knife and cut a little hole in it and slipped the button right through to complete it. Here I'm just splitting all the seams. I'm going to be weathering this vest to make it look a bit older and a bit more worn out like his. He's got, like, you can see the pockets here. They're very worn out. I weathered them before attaching them, so it would be a bit less work. So now I'm just taking a piece of a broken cheese grater and I'm fraying up all the sides just like his original vest. It's all worn out. And then I'm also taking it and I'm rubbing it all over the rest of the vest to give it a more worn out look. This is a very kind of brightly colored camo fabric in comparison to his, so I wanted to fade that a little, and I accomplished that by rubbing a cheese grater all over it. It was a bit of a messy process, but in the end it made the vest softer in texture. Actually, it made it a lot softer and easier to wear. It made it look better and it made the edges look really cool. I think it looks really cool frayed up like that compared to how it was before. And here is the finished product. I'm really happy with how it turned out, especially seeing as this was my first piece of clothing I ever made all on my own with my own measurements and patterns and all that, so kinda couldn't be happier with it, especially compared to what I had in the beginning. Alright, we're moving on to the hat. I actually made a hat. I bought a patch off of eBay. It was a little bit too big, but it was all I could find for Power Slate patches, and I wanted it to look like Bruce's hat, so I painted the gold parts blue. He had a blue and a gray beanie that he would, I don't remember which parts of which tour he used them on, but there was one that had a blue beanie, so this had some blue on it, so I chose to do the blue one. So I painted all the gold parts a lighter blue to try to match his original hat. And that's what it looked like once it was done, but I ended up not even needing to make one because I had an awesome friend send me the actual one. Thanks, Tim! And with that, the costume's complete. I worked on this from July to September of 2020 between my full-time job, and here it is. I couldn't be happier with it, especially compared to my original costume. I think it was worth all the work and the headaches and the stress, and I really look forward to wearing it to a Maiden show one day. Thanks for watching, guys.